And this is a brand new episode. You're watching ABP Live Podcast. I'm Aabir Lahiry. Joining me today in conversation is Somik Raha. How are you, Somik?
Doing well, thank
The
you.
exact Bangla pronunciation is Somik. What does it mean actually, by the way?
It depends on who you ask. I think I've heard that it means calm.
Okay.
It also is a name from the Mahabharata.
Oh.
But the bigger thing is there's no one way to pronounce it. I think my parents also don't pronounce it correctly, so I've given up.
Wow.
But Somik works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have written a brand new book called Invaluable, Achieving Clarity on Value. What exactly is the backstory of this book? Why did you think of writing this book? And then we'll dig deep into the world of questions.
Yeah, so the story is actually in the preface, and it goes something like this: that I finished my PhD at Stanford on this topic. It was called Achieving Clarity on Value. And Stanford, the department I was in, Management, Science and Engineering, was having its 10th anniversary. And they were selecting each area, and they were asking whoever done research and finished that year to present it. So I was selected from the decision and risk analysis area.
Okay.
And when I presented my work, I had my deck in PowerPoint, and when I was practicing, I had timers set, which I forgot to take off. So when I was presenting, the deck just kept moving on its own. It was one of the worst presentations I've ever given. Oh. So I was really bummed about it. But surprisingly, after a couple of days, I met a professor who bumped into me and said, "Hey, I really like what you said. I want to talk to you." And when I went to meet this professor, she said, "Hey, this is great stuff. I think you should write a book." And my first question was, "Well, what would I possibly call it?" And she said, "I have a name for you. It's Invaluable." So that's how the name came, Invaluable, Achieving Clarity on Value.
I really love the warning sign at the back. This book is dangerous. You might stop comparing yourself to others. Financial wealth may no longer be a primary marker for success. You might count value very differently. You might even enjoy your work. How do we count value?
Well, a lot of people count value through money. Right? Or through, if you're a non-profit, then through some impact metric. And
maybe fame.
Yeah, it's like
social media followers.
There you go. So we have a lot of metrics there by which we've started to determine our self-worth. That's the dominant paradigm. And this book is dangerous because it might change that forever for you.
And what do you present?
So so this book does a frame shift. And the frame shift is, it's not about what other people measure, but who do you want to be? And once you start asking that question, who am I in this situation? Who do I want to be? You'll find a very different reflection on metrics. And in fact, you might end up on something that connects to your spirit. So the book makes a rebellious suggestion. People say metrics will disconnect you from your spirit. This book holds the possibility that sometimes it might connect you to your spirit.
Wow. Let's take a hypothetical example.
Yeah.
Consider like a 25-year-old guy, girl or boy. They know the world of social media. They are trying to be an influencer because that will give them more value, as you said. More social media followers, more validation from people around them. How do we counter that? Firstly, is it actually toxic? If yes, how do we counter that from your value system?
I think there are a lot of people who are doing research in this area, and they are finding a lot of negative impacts.
Okay.
And there's, of course, there's a positive side is also there. So I think the bigger issue, the reframe for me is not so much that, it's easy to say, oh, there's a negative impact, try stopping teenagers from social media. You can try, but I don't think you'll succeed. It's a little bit like the previous generation, like don't smoke.
Yeah.
We know how well that ended, right? So it's not going to work. So instead, we're probably better off investing in decision-making tools where people can really connect with, is this really for me?
And they can draw parallels, whatever is.
Yes.
They can actually weigh in the situation.
Make their own decisions. And that's the best we can do. And so this book really takes that approach of giving us a framework for understanding how we should value.
Okay.
Right?
Share some anecdotes. Share the framework if you.
So the framework comes. So the story behind the framework is also very interesting. How I got into all this was I was studying the Stanford Police Department.
Okay.
And I was using methods of ethnography, which comes from social science. And what I found was the Stanford Police Department cared about more than just enforcement of the law. So they did not look for money or profit. In fact, their core values in their work was public safety and education.
Okay.
And this is very surprising to me. So, I mean,
Okay, education is actually taken care by police.
Yeah,
right?
so they want to graduate good citizens. They're in a campus, so they see themselves as a department of public safety, like a department of electrical engineering.
Very cool.
So the way they did policing involved educating people. So if you got a citation for some violation with the bicycle, like you didn't have lights on or whatever it is, or you were speeding, didn't stop at a stop sign, you could waive the citation if you came to an education class. And the education class would then, initially people would come in with a lot of resentment, but the education class would bring in neurosurgeons who would show that, hey, if you're not wearing a helmet, your human brain is the one organ that cannot be repaired. And here are some really bad things that happen to people. And then over an hour, people would realize that these people actually care about my well-being, and they would leave with a lot of gratitude. And the citation is waived. It was a very different way.
That makes sense. Not penalizing them, not blaming them for their mistakes, actually changing and creating a paradigm shift into the outlook or the perception of the
Exactly. And so when this happened, so I went back to my professor and said, look, I'm in this area called decision analysis, which is about making good decisions, and we use mathematics. We're all busy optimizing for value. I guess I don't understand the word value anymore, because I don't see the connection to dollars with these values. So that's when he told me this amazing story of when he was an undergrad 50 years back at MIT. There was a professor who passed by for just one semester, and his name was Robert Hartman. And Hartman's story was that he fled Nazi Germany at a young age, where he just saw things getting bad before everybody else could see it. And then he dedicated the rest of his life to build a mathematics by which people would never make those mistakes again. And
From mathematics?
yes, from mathematics of value. So then my professor Ron Howard, he told me, why don't you go check out his work? And his work proved to be pretty pivotal. So my book starts off, like I present his work, but then I take some points of departure from it. And his framework is very profound. So he looks, and I'll come back to the social media example with the framework. So we experience, so there are 3 dimensions of value. And at a principles level, when you define it, he defined intrinsic values as ends in themselves.
Okay.
And he declared that life is axiomatically an intrinsic value, just definition. Okay, and extrinsic value are things that are means to an end. So intrinsic you don't have to justify, extrinsic you have to justify, it's a means to an end. Systemic are completely artificial constructs.
Okay.
So extrinsic has physical space-time reality, like this table has extrinsic value, we can rest on it. Systemic is, like mathematics is systemic, it doesn't exist, but it's very useful.
Like
Okay.
honesty.
Honesty is more behavior driven, so it has a reality, space-time reality.
Okay.
But a count of anything, like numbers, they don't exist except in our head. We organize our mind, our thoughts with it. So constructs like religion or principles, these are all systemic values. Because they're clear, it's the value of rule fulfillment. If it's clear, it's a systemic value. If it's unclear, and you can separate it, from, it's a means to an end, it's extrinsic. And if it is life itself, it's intrinsic. Okay. Then he said you could feel these values along these three dimensions, and the feeling of intrinsic value, intrinsic valuation, is inseparable from who you are. Okay. Extrinsic is strictly separable, you can separate, and systemic is the most removed, most objective. So I'll give you a simple example. In the book, I use the example of the commanding officer of a soldier who's been killed. And at some level, if you're fighting a war, so intrinsic valuation is, I lost a friend and colleague, a person I cannot replace. I lost a part of myself. I don't even know how to begin to talk about the loss.
True.
That's an intrinsic valuation of an intrinsic value, that's life itself. Now this commanding officer can also say, I'm fighting a war, this presents difficulties, now I have to deal with this. So now you are using this person's life as a means to an end. That's an extrinsic valuation of an intrinsic value. Third level, the commanding officer can now report the number of casualties in this war went up by the number 1. So now you've taken a rich human life that was lost and brought it down to a number. So we do this every day, all day long, whenever we engage with population statistics. We turn rich human lives into a single number. We have no connection, no feeling with who these people are, right? And so now you look at the social media.
So life is not just a number of 1, it is like a product of a lot different numbers.
It's not even numbers. It's like you cannot even begin to enumerate them. It's like when you intrinsically feel like, let's say, if you have a partner, life partner, or parents. Everybody has parents. You cannot begin to talk about the value of your parents. Like they're like a part of you. You feel it as inseparable. That's an intrinsic valuation. Now, if you say, "Oh, that person's useful to me," that's an extrinsic valuation. And you say number of followers, that's a systemic valuation, right? So now, right? And so we do this all day long without thinking about it. But that's what we're doing. Whenever you get in the land of systemic valuation, according to Hartman, you're basically dehumanizing people. And we do it for simple things. We do it for people who've done it for horrible things. The process is the same. And so when you take the social media example, if I'm making my self-worth connected to how many followers I have, my own life is an intrinsic value. But if I now connect it to something I can count, I've devalued my life and brought it down to the most objective possible number of followers. So then instead of saying that don't do this, it's wrong, I'm simply saying, do you agree with the principles that life is an intrinsic value? Yes. Then which kind of valuation are you doing when you count, get upset about having few followers? Oh, it's a systemic valuation. Do you want to be doing it? So now I've given principles where people can come to their own conclusions without judging them.
Wow. What are the outcomes from the research you did? What are the fundamental things which is mind-boggling in nature, which nobody actually thinks?
So this is Hartman's contribution.
Okay.
So my point of departure is, Hartman takes a little bit of a stick there where he says, you're making a mistake, right? And he takes it from the Nazi era where they were using racial superiority, other things, like very clear violations of these principles. My point of departure is, there are some cases where the impossible happens, where numbers can bring out your spirit. Okay. And when that happens, the numbers start to dance with life. They become numinous with an N. And numinous means inspiring. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. One is my daughter, when she was in a private school, in the nursery or first grade, and we just put her in, and this school had fees, and then they had a fundraiser. And for the fundraiser, there was a class coordinator, one of the parents, who called me and said, "Somik, there's a fundraiser happening. You're a part of the community. We'd like you to contribute." And my first reaction was, "Oh, I don't know if this year I'll be able to do it. It's been a hard year. I've already paid my fees." And he said, No, Somik, you don't get it. Our goal is, our metric of optimization or maximization is not how much money we're raising. We don't care if you give $10 or $1,000. That's not the goal. Our goal is community. You are a member of the community, and the metric we're using is percentage participation. We want 100% participation. You can give whatever you like, but you're a member of the community, and your giving expresses that you are part of the community. And the moment he said that, a big burden lifted off my shoulders, saying, yeah, I am a part of this community. I ended up giving more than I thought I would. And then I noticed when I would drive in, oh yeah, they have this metric. Every day it's changing, 89%, 90%. What is the percentage of participants of contributors? And this makes it equal. Like if the metric was how much have you raised, then there are big people and small people.
Right.
But if it is percentage participation, everybody is equal. And that metric immediately connects you to the value of community, which means something, right?
Wow.
So this is an example of a numinous metric. This comes up in chapter, I think, the chapter on numinous metrics, chapter 1, chapter 2. And then there's another one, which is a wonderful example of the US general who in Afghanistan, who was reflecting on the metric of success in the war.
What is that?
Yeah, so how do you know this war is succeeding? So it's like, well, how many enemies have you killed? Well, the whole country, if they're against what you're doing, you don't have that many people to fight. So how many will you kill? It will just keep coming. So that's not a very helpful metric. So then I think he thought about, well, can you get from point A to point B safely? But that felt incomplete. Finally, he landed on a very strange metric. He felt that if people feel safe, that's when they send their boys to school. But when they really, really, really feel safe, that's when they will send the girls to school. So his metric was how many girls are going to school. And then he would have his soldiers count, and that's when they would know they've really achieved peace in the region. It blew my mind. It's like, wow, that's a numinous metric. Like you don't expect this from a general, right? And here it is. It's like this is amazing. This is so inspiring. And people have different political views on wars and things like that. So you can have those views, but some respect comes when you see that even in the limitations one has fighting a war, one can respect life.
But on the contrary, for example, a Taliban ruling a country, they'll say that no, girls are not allowed to go to school. Certainly, that's not a peace arrangement, right? But for them, it is.
But that's after the US left, right? Yeah. So for the Taliban, you'd have to use the framework and say, hey, do you believe in the intrinsic value of life? If you can have that conversation, and then right?
Of course, that's a difficult.
So that's a different deal.
That's a difficult task in hand.
Yeah.
Wow. What is the outcome to all those young peeps who may be watching this podcast? What is your outcome? What is the summary of the entire book, which during your research you actually dug out from the brain?
So let me interpret your question as what's the goal of this book?
You can say so.
So if you look at many self-help books, you'll find that they're all trying to guide you towards a more fulfilling life, and a lot of them do it like there are many books which say, oh, you got a job that pays the bills, now go do something else to find meaning.
True.
And something in me rebels with that framing.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with having a wonderful hobby that gives you meaning, right? But we are most of the time stuck at coming back on Monday morning to our office, seeing the same group of people, and surrounded by metrics. You got to meet your targets, right? And then you feel your soul getting crushed. And this is a problem of epic proportions. A lot of young people, at some point, they burn out and they say, I can't do this anymore. And if sometimes people will say, oh, I'm in a for-profit, maybe I'll go to the non-profit and it'll be different. Then they find it's no different there. Then where do you go? There's nothing left. So my goal was to examine, and through the lens of counting, give people a way to connect to their spirit. So the book is written in a very countercultural way. It's not bringing in spirituality into work. It's the opposite. It is saying that I'm going to use the religion of materialism, accounting. And through accounting, my claim is we have not fully appreciated its philosophical depth. If we appreciate its depth, we will find it answers profound questions. And it gives us a path to connect to who we want to be.
But is spirituality the end goal of everybody's life?
No, but I'm not even saying that. It's like I'm saying that there are fundamental puzzles around who I want to be and how I find work fulfilling. That's common to everybody.
True.
The word spiritual.
True.
I don't even use that.
And
word.
you are actually depicting that as spiritual.
That to me, like some people call that spiritual, but to me it's fundamental. It's a fundamental aspect of our existence. That if you don't feel inspired in your work, you are going to burn out. You are going to be a burden to yourself and your family and your society, and basically unalive. Instead, my goal is, if we can find a way to come alive, if we can find the mental apparatus that says, this is the work I was born to do, then go do it, we'd be having a very different society, very different organizations.
Okay, I have a question in continuation to that.
Yeah.
For example, there's a guy who maybe bang on with his work, who's damn great in his work, whatever he does. He goes to office on time, this, that, performs a task and everything. But he does not have a goal in life. He's like, Jo chal raha hai, chalne do. I'm very happy doing this. Is he a bad guy? No. Fundamentally, no, because he may not have a goal, and it is not a mandatory. It is not a mandate for everybody to pursue a goal and to just follow that path. Few people may not even have a goal. Then how do we define life for them?
So I think so it's a really good question actually. What happens invariably, or at least my observation, is that you may be coasting through life, and then at a certain point you find yourself asking, what's my unique contribution?
True.
And if you can't differentiate yourself from
why am I in this world?
So, what am I? And you end up facing that question at some point or the other. Some people face it sooner, some people face it later.
Not for everybody.
If you don't, and you're fine, then you don't need this. You just keep your life simple. This is not for those who don't have an existential crisis. Sure. But if you get into that existential crisis, there are very few tools that connect to the world you are currently in. Mm-hmm. Most of them are going outside. There's nothing wrong with going outside, going to a meditation course, taking a sabbatical. All those are great. But then you got to come back to the same group of people.
Agreed.
And
then it's going to be more chaotic for you.
Yeah,
because you have left the pace, the velocity, and
you're seeing this nirvana thing out there. but no one's got any remote connection to that stuff that you just went and did on your sabbatical.
It's going to be a very different game now, again after that sabbatical, because you'll be jumping straight into like a revolving washing machine.
Exactly.
It's just like that.
Exactly. So the offer I'm making is, what if it's not the world that's broken, but my relationship with it? And if I can repair my relationship, and the way I can do that is I have to connect with metrics, because metrics drive our life. And I have to find those inspiring, numinous metrics that feel authentic to me. Only then can I fully commit to them. Only then can I inspire other people to commit to them. And so that work, that heavy lifting of knowing myself through the metrics I'm using, is a fundamental aspect of it.
Wow. What should anybody do when they are in a midlife crisis or existential crisis? What exactly they should do? Don't just say it.
No.
Then read my book.
No. I wasn't even thinking of that.
No.
I mean, it's a tough question, right? It's like when you're in a,
How should
I think
anybody
a
approach it?
midlife crisis is a very good thing. It means that you're alive. Right? A person who doesn't have a crisis, I would even question: are you really walking around as a living person? Right? Because if you're a living person, you will see this world makes no sense at all. How does it make sense? Right? And you would want to think about like how do you make sense or make peace with that? Like that conflict, if it has never come in somebody's life, it means, what have they been doing? Are they sleeping? So that's the first thing. Like, it's a good thing that somebody's having a midlife crisis. That means there is a possibility to actually wake up. They're starting to wake up, and several things can happen. If they don't have the right support system, people burn out, people go through unnecessary misery. But it can actually be a very joyful exploration. If you can find what you truly stand for, that midlife crisis is the point where people build courage, where they can actually take a step that's true to them. So that opportunity is lost if the clarity is missing on what should I do next. So midlife crisis should never be wasted. It's one of the best opportunities humans get in their life.
But have you seen people actually revamping their life after the midlife crisis?
Some do and some don't, right? And those who have support systems around them, those who have the right thinking partners, they find their way through it.
And if you don't have that, then
it's painful. It's very painful. For not just for them, for the people around them.
True.
Imagine being in an organization where your leader is having that crisis. What impact does it have on the team, right? Or on the spouse or on the children? It's terrible. And so framing it as a good thing, that we should be reflecting on who we are and finding ways to land, is a very human necessity of our time. So this book is offered as that, and I'm seeing it so rampant right now. And it's not like, oh, go do some nice course and you'll be all okay. It doesn't work like that. You have to come back and engage with the world like it is today.
True.
And find your way to rebel. Like, everybody's unique.
You can't live in a cocoon.
You can't, yeah.
You can't live in a cocoon.
Yeah.
So well said. What is the message to all those young peeps out there? Because primarily the audience is young for this podcast.
Yeah.
And primarily, I'm not saying that nobody watches below or above that age, but primarily young millennials, Gen Zs. And these days, a lot of pressure is on everybody's mental health because of studies, because of work pressure, because of family chaos, and a lot of other things. How do you tackle that if you have a theory, if you have a framework for that?
So what I've tried to do is to reduce or simplify this to 3 vectors.
Okay.
What is your emotional energy? Where is your emotional energy? Your heart. And this is about, think about if this was your last day on this planet. What is it that if you didn't make a significant progress and you'd feel like big regret? And if you did make progress, you'd feel like, oh, I can go in peace. What is that? If you can answer that, that's great. Like, that's your heart value. And if some people can't work with that question, so a different question is, what makes you angry? Not small angry, but big angry, like something broken in the world that you want to go, be the change in. So there are several questions in the heart chapter which help you find what is it that you uniquely and idiosyncratically get emotional about. That's very precious. So I'll just say, when I say values, people hear different things. People hear cultural norms like integrity.
True.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what's important to you. That's what I mean by values. So heart is the emotional energy. The second vector is your unstoppable energy. This is something that, Aabir, whenever you walk in the room, this comes in, and your friends will know, your colleagues will know. You bring a certain kind of energy. It's your superpower.
Yeah.
it's your curse at the same time. So
Super shitty jokes. That's what they know me for. So yeah.
So
maybe that's my energy.
It's the earliest habit that you can't quite trace where did this come from, but it's there. And everybody, if you look, you might find it. So one example is somebody who's like, can't stay with one project for a long time. They've got to keep changing. And this is their habit, like they just have to move on to something else. It would be a terrible hire if you wanted to see through large major projects beginning to end, but a fantastic hire in a consulting company.
True.
Like would be a rock star, right? So understanding what is something you cannot change about yourself.
True.
Is very important. And then the third one is your head, your intellectual energy. That is in some sense perhaps the most important one once you figure out the heart and the habit, because you can't really change your heart. It is what it is. You discover it. You can't really change your habit. You're molded a certain way. But you can change, or you can shape with your life effort, the context of your work, saying that this is the profession I am creating with my effort, and whatever the distinction you pick, this is how I choose to work, and you can give a talk about that space, you can write a book on that space. What is that? That's your intellectual space. And once you've carved out these three spaces
and bind them together,
that's you are the integration of these three. Your work is the integration. So if these three things are understood about you, you would feel complete.
And even if one is missed out,
you'll feel like, oh, there's a very big hole. Like if your habit is not legitimized, then you're always going to get into trouble because you can't turn it off. And if your heart is not moving forward with whatever head you've picked, you'll remain unfulfilled. So you need all three together. And if the head is not there, then you're like a ghost. You've got these aspirations and this energy, but nowhere to deploy them, right? So three simple things to think about. If you can find this is the executive summary of your spirit. And so imagine writing your resume or your cover letter saying, these three things are the things that matter to me. And now this is your unique presentation wherever you're interviewing. This is who you are. Like you can't argue against it. This is true. And now some places will not find a match, but those places that do, boy, is it a strong match because they've bought into the authentic you.
Very well said. Very well said. On that note, I guess I'll by my full heart, I'll say thank you. That firstly, I really love the book because of the fact that a lot of books are like, no offense to anybody, but like I do get a lot of books. Some are academically very rich, some are just for readers, fun. But the good part about this book is I've never seen a more interactive book because you have doodles, you have graffitis, illustrations inside the book. There are a lot of exercises, chota mota, you can write notes, everything. It's a good read. I haven't read the entire thing. I'll surely read it and get back to you on this. I'll surely give my own feedback. But thank you very much for writing Invaluable and having a conversation with me on this podcast.
Thank you, Aabir.
Thank you.
Thank you.